morning. Thank you all so much for trusting me to share a few moments with you. That was probably the kindest introduction that I have ever been offered. So it's certainly an honor to be with you on this humbling 108th anniversary. That's just incredible. So I just came to say a few words about mental health and grief. And if there, I'd absolutely take questions too, if that's cool with you all. But we all feel the change that COVID has brought to us, the many losses in our lives, from death to the loss of livelihood. I mean, we could go on and on about how COVID has changed us. And grief doesn't always have to be from death, right? It can be from any changes that we didn't expect. And I think it's really important for us to recognize that grief is a universal emotion that touches us all. It doesn't matter what our religion is, our background, how much money we make, where we live. Grief is a universal. It touches all of us. And it can look like depression. We get sad. We don't want to do things. We may be crabby. And sometimes people mistake our crabbiness for something else when it's really that we're grieving. Sometimes we just don't want to get out of bed. We don't want to eat. We don't take care of ourselves. And then there's that guilt and shame of how we've changed and how we might be affecting others around us, right? There's no timeline for this. I think that when we talk about grief, it's like, okay, when do we set an expiration date on this, right? Or those around us sometimes get sick and tired of us, right, of being sad. But that's an imaginary thing. It doesn't have an expiration date. The shelf life doesn't go bad. And there was researchers that talked about the different stages of grief, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of them. Denial, depression, anger, bargaining, ultimately acceptance. Some of us never get there. And there was always this thought that we kind of march through those stages. Well, we don't. We can be in anger one day and acceptance in another, and it really can just kind of go back and forth and vacillate, right? Sometimes grief has brought me to my knees. I lost my mama a few years ago, and I could just be doing, I don't even know where it comes from sometimes, and some are shaking heads out there, and you know what I'm talking about. You could be doing something as simple as preparing a meal, and all of a sudden, whoa, here it is, right? And sometimes we understand where it came from, and sometimes we don't. But what's important is grace. Yeah. Having grace with ourselves and saying that it is okay to not be okay, right? And also to extend that grace to those around us that are also grieving, because I don't know what baggage you're carrying, and you don't know mine maybe. And I find that now more than ever, we need to treat each other in this way, because COVID has brought a level of sadness and despair to us that some of us have never experienced before. And as a professional, a technique that I use with folks and ask people to consider is mindfulness. And I know that word gets thrown around a lot, and it may have a hippy-dippy connotation to it, but it's not really. Mindfulness is a wonderful practice that is rooted in Buddhist, actually, practices. And it teaches us to be present in the moment and to embrace whatever it is that we're feeling in a non-judgmental way, and just accepting it for as it is and what it has come to us as. It teaches us to always be present. You're all being mindful right now. You're practicing mindfulness with me right now. And when we look to mindfulness to help us to understand our grief, there are some tips that they suggest. And one is to accept our feelings. Don't run from it, because running never solved anything, right? Another way, we need to express our feelings. And I'm seeing beautiful expressions today, be it in singing, dance, journaling your feelings, talking about it with someone. Another thing to do is to reach out, and I sense the community here, which is so wonderful. Share your story with a trusted friend, a pastor, or sometimes even a counselor such as myself is appropriate. And having that grace for yourself to know when you need to reach out to a professional is self-love. It really is. We always have to continue to take care of ourselves, even in the grieving process. And I think that oftentimes is what gets thrown by the wayside. But making sure that we're eating, that we're moving our bodies, that's sometimes the hardest thing to do, right, when we're sad. Because grief can feel like you are scaling a mountain, and it takes energy and training, but we must care for ourselves to continue to climb that mountain when we're suffering. Another tip from mindfulness is to celebrate the life that has been lost. And this can be in any form that you want. And I'm not going to lie, it hurts, especially early on after the death, to do this. But finding a new tradition sometimes to honor the person that you've lost is really important. We don't ever move forward from grief, really. We move on with it. It's like we always carry it with us. It's not something that we get over. It's always with us. It's a passenger, right? And I often tell folks that I'm working with, we feel like grief is a monster when we're feeling it, right? But it's not. It feels that way. But that sadness and that pain is a reflection of the beauty and love of the relationship that you had with the person that has been lost. Mental health surely has become the new pandemic after COVID, right? We're seeing sisters and brothers developing depression and anxiety and substance use issues. And part of taking care of ourselves and others is to knowing when to identify, maybe you need help, maybe I need help, and getting that warm hand of help out to someone. Because self-care is knowing when we're unwell. People always ask me, when do I know that I need help? Or when do I know that my sister or brother needs help? And really, when it begins to impact our functioning. And that doesn't mean that, just in the work environment. It means, are we not a good friend? Are we not a good family member anymore? And again, not saying this with judgment, but if we're impacted in those roles. And help can come in the form of therapy, a support group. There are many grief support groups that are virtual now, which, that's also helpful. Because I feel like that the virtual benefit of COVID is that maybe folks that didn't want to get treatment before because of shame are more willing to do so now. So really talking about it, and sometimes accepting that we might need medication. So I will be the first to admit I have had major depression in my life, and I took medication, and that was the best thing that I ever did for myself, and it probably saved my life. So I would encourage all of you to treat these things just like you would treat your high blood pressure or diabetes or any other medical problems, because it is up to each and every one of us to end the stigma of mental health. I'm going to share a few things with you before I go, and I appreciate you entertaining me talking to you. So this is a poem that I really like. Allow. There is no controlling life. Try corralling a lightning bolt containing a tornado. Dam a stream and it will create a new channel. Resist and the tide will sweep you off your feet. Allow and grace will carry you to higher ground. The only safety lies in letting it all in, the wild and the weak, fear, fantasies, failures, success. When loss rips off the doors of your heart or sadness veils your vision with despair, practice becomes simply just bearing the truth. In the choice of letting go of your known way of being, the whole world is revealed to you with new eyes. Thank you.